All right.
Hello, Peter.
Hey,
It's
how you
a
doing?
it's a lovely Saturday morning here. It's nice and cold. So, how are things today?
Very good. Very good. How
Oh,
about
that's
you?
good. Oh, pretty good.
Good.
So watched a bunch of your videos and saw that you're paralyzed, and I thought I'd get the full story so we can put that up. So why don't
All right.
we start a couple days before it all happened, and what were you doing in life, like work wise, school wise, and we'll go
Mm.
from there.
All right. Well, I grew up on a farm, starting right from the very beginning, and was very dedicated to going to a denominational church ceremony. Never knew Christ, never knew the Bible. Taught Bible stories in Sunday school, but never really knew anything about it. So when I got to college, I was unprepared for life in the big city, and clearly, my I had a little bit of a drinking problem, a little bit of drug problem,
What were
and
you in school for again?
I was going for manufacturing engineering at Humber College. So
Okay.
it was a pretty intense course. I mean, there's a lot of stress involved. It was
So
very
you must have been a
difficult.
pretty smart dude back then.
You know what? I was kind of always worked on doing just enough to do good enough, but never really putting effort into doing very well.
Oh
I
yeah.
wasn't. I was able to, but I wasn't smart enough to actually apply myself. So I wouldn't call myself a smart dude. I was just your typical party social guy who wanted to go to college and move away from home to the big city. And while I could still get some career going, I was applying myself. It was a difficult course, so I did have to apply myself. But
Yeah, sounds pretty difficult.
it was, yeah. But very rewarding. We had a very, really harsh teacher, instructor who graded
Well,
very hardly, and we had 6 people left in the course by the second year. So that's pretty.
wow.
I know it's like incredible.
But
So
yeah,
yeah, so I developed some friendships in college, and that's pretty well where the whole thing started. When I was going to college and it was a summer break, I always worked at a factory in between to make some money so I can go back to school. And it was a long weekend, and I had a
which
real.
long weekend was it?
It was a civil. It was called a civic holiday at the time. It was August 1st, long weekend.
Oh,
So
okay.
it was
So it
a
wasn't May 2 for or anything crazy.
no, no. I used to go on those trips too. I used to go canoeing. I was big into canoeing because I had my own
Oh yeah.
canoe, and we went. But again, it was party, fishing and party at the same time. Very dangerous.
Did you ever get your orca?
My orca? No, I don't know what you
Yeah,
mean
or
by
did
that.
that exist back then?
I don't even know
Yeah,
what you're
the
talking about.
Ontario Recreational Canoeing Association.
Oh
They
no,
had
I
different.
didn't even know what that
You're
was.
not a certified canoer.
Absolutely not. I just
Okay.
I just grew up with my family, my parents. We had a canoe, and we went to places like parks. I just love canoeing. I love the outdoors. Big on
Yeah.
outdoors. Love camping, stuff like that. So yeah, and but this wasn't that. I was just going up on the weekend to visit a college buddy of mine who invited us up to Huntsville and to have a good time and meeting
Oh
his
yeah.
friends and pretty being a pretty social guy and loving that. It was something I always wanted to do. So went
Well,
to
it'd be a good time away from the monotony of working in the factory, right?
well,
I
yeah.
got to party hard.
Who likes factory work? I didn't. I mean, I was going to end up working in the office of the factory, but assembly line work is really terrible. And I was on a midnight shift, 6 days a week. That was kind of ruining my summer. So it would have been a good break. So
Yeah.
I decided to go for the weekend. My mother wasn't thrilled, but I did anyways. And when I went up there, I had a couple of days where it was a lot of fun. And but the after a couple of days of partying, we went on a Sunday morning of that weekend to get pretty grubby after a couple of days. The place I was staying, their water pressure wasn't very good. because
So like a cottage out in the middle of nowhere type of thing.
well, that actually was a house of a friend of mine, his parents' place, and we were staying there for the weekend. The cottage was not mine; I wasn't staying there. So when we were in this place, even their place, Huntsville, you have these places that live in the country that don't seem to have the amenities we do in other areas, right? So it didn't have water
Especially
pressure.
nowadays too, right? Like back then was
Yeah, it was
not as
just
good.
yeah. I think it's just because of the location, and we were a bunch of guys going up, each wanting a shower, right? So the hot water ends up dying and water dying. So I was the last one. I didn't get a shower, and there's a couple of us didn't get a shower. So the next day, on that Sunday morning, we went to a softball game. My friend was playing a softball game. Watched the game, and afterwards there was a party at a cottage of the softball players, and so we went there afterwards. And that was the cottage I actually sat around. It was kind of a chilly, cool day. Wasn't warm at all. August, you get that beginning of August days where
Yeah.
it's usually a cold spell. Always, every year, it's a cold spell. And I'm actually reminded of this every August at the beginning when there's a cold spell. Reminded of this event.
Well, that's always good with the bugs though when it's a little bit cooler like that. So they
Yeah,
don't eat you alive.
yeah. But it wasn't swimming weather. I'll tell you that. It
No.
was not warm. And so we were just playing some cards outside, and everybody's doing their own thing, right? Kind of having fun. But the day just started, right? After the ball
Yeah.
game, it was probably just after noon, 1 o'clock or something. And so we decided, well, let's jump in the water and get at least get some, feel a little fresher. So it was a really long dock, and I wasn't familiar with it at all. So when I see a long dock, I think, well, that's going to be deep water. I mean, like I said, I've been camping and I've been in cottages all my life. So a friend of mine, who both of us had pools at home, he ran off the dock first. And the last thing we heard was, "Watch out, it's shallow." A big warning scream from the cottage owner, "Watch out, it's shallow." And as it turns out, it was. He dove in first, did a shallow dive. I knew how to do shallow dive, but I dove in crooked to avoid him. And I hit my forehead on the sand. It was really shallow. Not at all what I expected. And
Like, how many feet deep do you think it was?
3.
Oh
I
man.
was 3 feet deep. I'm sure that's all it was.
So that's basically just jumping right,
Yeah, right in the
directly on
sand.
the ground.
It might be one of those cartoons where you hit your head in and your feet are standing up out of the water. I don't know.
And you couldn't see the bottom? Was it like a murky type of water, or what was it?
I didn't even look. It was the sun. The sun was out, so the sun
Oh,
was
you
beating
probably
on the
couldn't see
waves.
it, like it
So
was reflecting.
no, yeah, and I didn't look. We ran off the dock. We were just gonna go quick dip and go hang out with the people again. So it wasn't intended to really just do this. Take our time. Just jump in and go in. So as soon as I did dive in, the jolt was all I felt was on my forehead. People think you can
Yeah.
feel it in your neck. I didn't feel it in my neck, but I knew what I'd done because I took a course in first aid, and one of the part of the course was an ambulance driver telling us how he knows of diving accidents and how often common they are amongst males from 18 to 25. It was most
Your
common.
exact demographic.
Yeah. So I did this and I couldn't move a muscle. Face down in the water, unable to save myself, unable to yell, put my hand up, warn anybody, just floating. But I was totally conscious through the whole thing. Knew
Yeah.
I was thinking, okay, guys, I know I joke around a lot, but clearly I'm not joking now because it took a long time before they finally realized it because they knew I was kind of joking around a lot. And they didn't take me serious, and they waited until they realized, hey, you know what, he probably can't hold his breath that long, so it must be real. So my best friend pulled me out of the water. They all came over and put me on the dock. In the
You were telling me before that there was a guy that was on the lake that saw this, a doctor.
Right, there was a doctor with a speedboat, and he was driving by, and as he was looking over, he saw this dummy jumped in the water and realized I had broken my neck, so he immediately called 911. So the ambulance came fairly quick, but there was, probably 15, 20 minutes of laying down on the dock, and everybody's kind of in a panic mode. And so I was kind of calm, surprisingly. You would think that I'd be like the worst, bawling or something. I wasn't. I was trying to calm everybody else down by joking around. One of the things.
So you could still talk?
Oh yeah, I was fine. I was alert and everything. I was just like whiz right now. Yeah, there was. I mean, everybody's different, but I didn't hit anything really hard. What I did was just tap the head of my forehead there, which knocked my neck back and instantly paralyzed. It was very simple. I mean, people do a lot more stupid things than that and come out unscathed. But yeah, it was quite the traumatic.
Well, I think every time you do something stupid, there's, you're closer to having something like that happen. Right?
Yeah. Well, and the funny thing was, I wasn't a daredevil type. I really, even though I was, people think farmers are always a little more daredevil, but I wasn't. I was more careful. I was scared of heights most of the time. But with the pool, I knew I could dive. I knew I could do things like that, and that was just a stupid thing to do. I should have known better. So I never felt angry because I knew it was my fault. I wasn't drunk. I had one beer. It was early afternoon, but I knew it was my fault. The rest of the weekend, I was careless and wild.
Yeah.
But this time was just simply trying to get washed out.
Well, you were sober, you knew better, and you had a warning, and I mean, it really was all on you, right? Like,
it was. I shouldn't know.
You can't really blame anybody else.
That's right. I found that when I'm going through rehab, that a lot of people get angry because they want to blame someone else. They blame a cottage owner or blame a friend of mine who drained his own pool. He dove in. He never blamed anybody else because he drained his pool and he jumped in and broke his neck in an empty pool. And it was his party. He was drunk. He doesn't remember anything. But he was never really bitter at anybody because, well, he knew he did it. And I think that makes a big difference with accepting it. So I was not I wasn't really traumatized at the beginning like some people might think.
Yeah, some people never get over that, and they just live a whole life of, blame and resentment and just anger, right? Like it's
huge.
That probably helped. Yeah,
huge percentage. There was so many people that were bitter in the rehab. It was just unbelievable. Yeah. So anyway.
Okay, so they didn't have a helicopter for you. They had to take you out by ambulance.
Yeah, what happened was they took me in the ambulance to Huntsville General Hospital. Made an assessment, took some X-rays, recognized that I broke my neck, and then of course I had to go to the trauma unit at Sunnybrook Hospital in Toronto. So Huntsville is 2 hours north of Toronto, and at that time the Highway 11 was a mess. It was ready to be redone. They didn't have the 400, and it was kind of a very slow drive in an ambulance. I was supposed to get a helicopter ride, but another girl had broken her neck at the very same time. So when they said I was going to get a helicopter ride, I thought, well, that's a bonus. But I didn't get the helicopter. She did. So they said they had to take me to Toronto on an ambulance on a board, which I don't know the name. I used to know the name of it was, but it was to stabilize the neck, and they
got to strap it right down so you don't move and make it worse, right?
Extremely painful, because what you're doing is if you're like pushing someone's head against a board, and it's with a lot of pressure for hours, especially in an ambulance that's going over a very rough road. That was the worst part of pain, not breaking my neck. That ambulance ride was brutal, and they were hoping to give me sedation, but I was probably so used to drugs at the time that it didn't affect me at all.
Oh man!
I don't want to make it sound like I was like a really heavy user, but it does affect the ability.
Well, you desensitized or whatever, and then it's like you need a lot more for the same effect.
Right. And of course,
the other thing is too, it's probably like, if you were on a perfectly flat road and there was a piece of gravel on it, you could probably feel it. You're that sensitive, right? Probably felt a heck of a lot worse than it was.
Yeah. I mean, your head's already bruised, like from that board, and it's constantly bouncing. Oh, it's just terrible.
And that's all you can think about too, right? It's
I
like,
know that ride, and they expected me to not remember it because I know the girl. She didn't remember a helicopter ride.
yeah. So you met that girl later on
Oh
then?
yeah, absolutely. Ended up that we were beside each other in the ICU. Because they saw that I wasn't really traumatized emotionally like she was. They put her beside me, and so we couldn't see each other because we were both looking up all the time. So all I
Yeah.
did was see the roof of the or the ceiling of the Sunnybrook
Do
ICU.
you know? Do you know what happened to her? Was she paralyzed then forever as well, or?
Yes, she dove off a dock, not a dock. The what do you call it, raft. She dove off of that, hit bottom, broke her neck. Same break, exact same break, same time, same area. She was in Barrie, I was in Huntsville, pretty close to the same. So but she had a different story. She was parents were strict Yugoslavian Catholics, and
Oh,
the guilt, and they didn't speak very good English. And she also had just lost her brother a couple of years before,
oh wow.
her older brother. So it was very traumatic on the family. And so they
Yeah.
put her beside, and every time her parents came to visit, they had to dress in black. They're still in black, I think, because of her brother's death. And they were so depressing, and so it really got to her. So the nurses put her beside me, and we could talk. We didn't see each other. I didn't see her actually for the first time until weeks later, when I was in rehab. I never saw her, except we talked all the
Wow.
time. We became good friends. Helped her through. I was a couple of years older, and helped her through her adjusting to depression.
You were neck break buddies.
Yeah, we actually were, and it was nice to have someone to go through it with, and she really appreciated our relationship. But
Yeah.
yeah, it didn't turn out well for her though, and that's kind of sad. But as far as spending a year in rehab and after 6 weeks in Sunnybrook, and most of that in the ICU, which is not a pleasant place to be, since Sunnybrook is a traumatic unit, so it's a lot of heavy accidents, a lot of injuries. In the middle of the night, this one lady, she was on life support, and she kept stop breathing, and they had to tell her to breathe, and they got tired of doing that, and I couldn't sleep, so they just asked me if I would just say every time her beeper went off that she's not breathing, can you please ask her to breathe, and just say so and so breathe, and she would start breathing again. That's what I did.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
That is pretty crazy.
Unless you've gone through it, it's just an experience that you just shake your head at. It's quite,
Yeah.
but the hardest part, I think we talked about this before, was not getting the news. When I got the news that I had permanently will not walk again, it was given to an intern, and I think I was one of the first persons he ever had to tell that he would not be able to walk again. Now here's a 21-year-old going to college, fairly popular, having fun all the time, and now there's an intern who has to come and tell me you will never walk again. So when I saw him coming over, I knew what he was going to tell me. It wasn't a surprise. I knew what I had done. So he was all nervous. He was more nervous than I was. So I was just waiting for him to, say it. And so I knew what he was going to say. And as he said, well, you'll never be able to walk again. And I said, so he just stared at me, expecting me to bawl or to be emotional. And I didn't know how to react. So I just said, oh, well. I think I threw him a bit. And I'm not saying I'm any special person about that. It was just careless. I don't know what it was. To be honest, I can't even give you an answer. But I just didn't get over emotional. And I think that was a negative thing. I think I needed to take my life more serious in the past. That's why I ended up in that position.
Yeah.
But
Well, it's like you almost like still didn't take it serious even after finding out, right? Like it's like
yeah.
you never really expressed that, right? Like
yeah, I really can't say what it was. I don't know, but I know one thing, that I did not get depressed. You at night you wonder if your legs are moving because you get phantom pain, you get phantom movement. You feel like your legs are actually moving and they're not. So you sometimes call someone over. I think my legs are moving, but it's not real. It's phantom. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, it's different. Paralysis is kind of an odd word because you feel your legs prickles all the time, 24 hours a day. There are prickles going like when you lay on your arm and
Oh,
it falls
wow.
asleep. That's what I have all the time. Still, 40 years later, still have it. Just
It's never gone away.
now, your brain just kind of shuts it out. But like as I talk about it now, I can feel it. So
Wow.
yeah, it's kind of paralysis is there's a lot of pain involved.
So how long were you in the hospital before they told you that, or was that
Yeah, it was
pretty?
it was probably 6 weeks. I know was in Sunnybrook. I think the
Yeah.
4 weeks was been 2 to 4 weeks. I can't really remember now. Probably somewhere in between there was an ICU. Then moved to the
Yeah.
unit where you weren't allowed to drink, and here in an unair conditioned hospital in the middle of August, it's
Ooh.
and you're not allowed to drink water. There was a reason, medical reason for that. So they gave you ice chips so you could hang in there, and they'd say stop drinking so much, and you weren't even drinking anything. That was hard. Um, so the stay was not fun. I was on bed until finally you get a halo vest put on. Those are the bars that hold your head in a
Oh, yeah.
position, so you can sit up, and you can't go to the rehab until you have that vest on. And it's a pretty creepy looking thing.
So but the how long was it? Like you're in the hospital. Like was it day one, day two? When did he come in and say that you'd never walk again? Like when did they decide that?
Well, I was in Huntsville the first day, and the next day I was in Sunnybrook. That was
Yeah.
the day. So
So
they
it was the
seen the
second day.
yeah they seen the X-rays, and
They're
so
like, nope,
yeah,
no chance.
no chance. There
Yeah.
at those days, most people did not walk again. Now today it's different. People know to freeze the neck. People know the procedure after you break your neck. But in those days, most people remain paralyzed for life. Now you see people walking out the rehab. Maybe not full, but a lot of people are walking now.
Well, even having more hand control or something, right? Like
Yeah, just some
just some sort of improvement or whatever.
right. But the hardest part was telling my mother, who didn't
Yeah.
want me.
When did she come in? Was she there like the first day? And
Oh yeah, she got a call in the middle of the night and saying you must come to Sunnybrook Hospital on the second after in the middle of the night on I think
oh
day
man.
one. And yeah, that's not a pleasant call to get. And 6 months earlier in January, my father had died of cancer, and I took care of my father when I was walking. He died a very slow, long, painful death at home, and she took care of him. And I came back from college to take care of him until he died, and he lived longer. So she had just gone through that. At the same time, her mother was going through cancer and was in Kitchener Hospital. The same time I broke my neck. So you
Wow.
can imagine her year. 1982 was a very bad year.
Well, it probably doesn't get any worse than that, really.
Yeah,
Like
I mean,
that's one thing into another, like right after.
yeah, they say things happen in threes. Eh, definitely did that
Yeah.
year. So while she's trying to rush to see her son, who just broke her neck, she has a mother dying of cancer in Kitchener, and they didn't even tell
And you
her.
have sorry, and you have is it two sisters that
Yes.
you have as
Yeah.
well? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I have two sisters, but being in Toronto and not particularly that close to those two sisters.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to know what your kind of family structure was. So
Yeah,
so your mom's coming to visit you midnight, and let's keep going from there.
yeah. So she came to visit, and came to see if I'm alive. It's harder for her. I was thinking all I could think of was how is she gonna know? So she had heard from the intern before or the doctor. I don't know which one. And then she came over, and actually she didn't hear yet. What she did, she came to me first. She might have heard something, so she knew I had done something like jumping in the water, but she either didn't register that I'm going to be paralyzed for life. So she said, I want to see the doctor. I want to see the doctor. And I said, Ma, I won't walk again. They already told me. And that was that was harder than me finding the news, to tell your mother after her husband died of cancer, while her mother was dying of cancer, that I'll never walk again. It's brutal. I mean, I just can't imagine even thinking about it now, so many years later, that she had to go through that. But, that's what the consequences of my actions affect other people as well, right?
Yeah. A lot of people think that, it's like if I'm, out doing this drugs, it only affects me, but they never really think down the chain. It's like, to watch someone you love get like hurt or damaged or broken. Right. I guess it's so painful. We don't really, a lot of people don't really think it's like, well, I'm not hurting anybody by doing that.
Yeah, but you are.
But you are. Like,
it's definitely. But I had no idea. Like, you just kind of, at that age, we don't really think about consequences. We do the actions, we do what we want, and the consequences later, we go, oh well, like I did.
Well, that's why there's the group for those injuries are young men, right? Like
right.
It's, if they, it just shows that when you get older, you start thinking about things a little bit more. But when you're young, you think you're invincible. You're just having fun. It's exactly. You don't really think about what's going to happen.
Right. Then you have to suffer the consequences, and we blame someone else. Right.
Yeah.
I didn't think I blamed anybody else. I didn't even told immediately the cottage owner, I'm not going to sue, because I knew I did it.
You took ownership.
Anyways. I took ownership of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So after 6 weeks, and I'm now in Lyndhurst Hospital in Toronto, which is a specialty spinal cord injury rehab center. And one of the things I wanted to do mainly was to live independently without attendant care. Now, my break was C6-7, which is a quadriplegic, yet with some arm movement and fairly strong. Had some triceps, which affect how I can transfer, get in and out of bed. And all that makes a huge difference. Matter of fact, anybody with C6 without the C7, which is the level of your vertebrae, and where the spinal cord inside is damaged, that little 1/8 of an inch or 1/16 of an inch will affect whether you can live independently for the rest of your life or not. That's pretty major, right?
Yeah.
So some of them would actually hate me because of my level, because I would go to rehab, I would go to the physio, which I liked. Occupational therapy I didn't care for, but I worked out, and I was told, well, you won't be able to live on your own attendant care, and you won't be able to do this and that. But I was determined that I would. And so I got encouragement from a couple of people. And I worked really hard. So I got to be pretty strong enough that I could live without attendant care services at the time. Which is pretty major for my break.
Yeah. Well, you did that for a number of years then, right?
I did. Yeah. I started off in a supportive housing unit. But the only reason they asked me there because I was going to go back home to Stratford. Yeah, I live with my mother, which probably wouldn't have been a good idea. It wouldn't have worked out too well. I probably frustrated her, and being patient, allowing everybody to do stuff for me initially in my accident wasn't my best feature. I would probably be so impatient. So, as it turned out, my house wasn't accessible. They weren't going to modify it because they didn't have a job in Stratford to go to, because it was based on employment futures to get funding. Okay. Yeah. So without that, I would have had to go back to Toronto, where they were organized already a supportive housing, which means you live in this apartment building, one unit on top of the other. And it was one of the first, I think it was the first, I don't want to clearly say that, but I think it was the first in Canada where it's controlled by the people with disabilities. So you have your own board, you hire your own, you have a person you hire to hire the staff, and the board of directors would be mostly the residents that are disabled.
So kind of like a group thing type of.
Yeah, but it was in a regular, so it was an apartment building, so it was integrated with the people. But it was Metro Housing as well, which is subsidized. So the other people who live there are subsidized too, right?
Yeah.
So living there, I was going to offset the amount of hours by attendant care. So they wanted me to move in there, which worked out good. But it was also a place that didn't help me because I didn't really need the attendant care. But there was a lot of stuff going on in that apartment building, soap operas.
I bet there was quite a bit of drama.
There was a lot of drama, drugs, partying, relationships going on, breaking. Oh, it was.
Well, you get a whole bunch of people with a similar situation, right? And it's like it's got to be tough.
It wasn't even that. I mean, that was the good part. Was after going through rehab, you meet a lot of people, and the same people are moving apartment building. You already developed the relationships that you want to have. So my best friend was living in that building. That wasn't the hard part. The hard part was the people that were outside of the spinal cord injury people. It was.
Oh.
They were. A lot of them were low income. A lot of them were having addictions.
How big was this apartment building then?
It was a 15-story apartment building in Toronto. So.
Oh man! So there would have been a heck of a lot of people there.
Oh yeah. So it was
and low income, subsidized. Right. Oh, you would have everything there, especially Toronto. Right?
Oh yeah, it would have been
very diverse and
very. Now it wasn't as diverse as it is now. I mean, it's much more diverse now. But at those days, there was racial tension there with the attendants. We hired a lot of attendants, and we. The ones who were spinal cord injury, we didn't have that problem. We were just we didn't care, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't an issue with us. It was more of an issue with maybe some of the people that worked who thought we were being racist because we were accusing them not doing their jobs. But that's part of the territory.
Yeah, that's part of the city too, right?
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. So I only lived there for a couple of years. I got a job in Scarborough, and I was trying to commute from the West End to the East End.
So sorry, before you go on to there, so your schooling, that was pretty much done after rehab, and then you were in the apartment building for a couple of years. Did you get training while you were in the apartment building? Is that kind of what happened, or?
Well, I was on. It's called vocational rehab, so they get a counselor to help you find a job. I had tried my old course I was taking, but everything was computerized. And I had done everything as far as drafting was by paper and pencil. That's all I was trained in for 5-6 years. It was, and all of a sudden now it's CAD-CAM, which is a computer drafting program. I had no idea how to even put a floppy disk, which probably is so outdated nobody knows what that is anymore, into a slot. I failed a computer course before I broke my neck. So since everything changed and was computerized, I had no clue. I knew how to develop a part, but it wasn't the same. It changed in that short period of time. So I changed that course, and I need now to look for some employment because first of all, I didn't want to be without a job. I always worked. A lot of the guys there would be happy to live off their disability pension, but you can't live off of that. So I had aspirations of at least having a job. I didn't think I ever have a family. I already wrote that off being in a wheelchair. I didn't think I could ever have the career I had, but one thing I wanted to do was work. I couldn't handle not working.
Well, it would give you purpose, right? Because if you don't work, you don't do anything. I mean, your life has no purpose. So why are you even alive, right? So it's at least having a job, it gives purpose to your life, right?
Right. And Scarborough made more sense because that's where the Variety Village, which was a huge sports complex. And one of the things in rehab that they had was people came to visit, and it was the head of wheelchair rugby. It was called murder ball at the time. It was a sport for quadriplegics that are in manual wheelchairs. And it's now called quad rugby. It's in the Paralympics and everything. It's a huge sport. But it was in basically its infancy stage, and there was a Toronto team, and there was Ontario Provincials. So they came recruiting at the rehab center. So the athletic complex was in Scarborough. And so that worked out. I got a job in Scarborough. Athletic complex was in Scarborough. And the commute in Toronto was 2 hours long for a half-hour drive because of the traffic. Wow. It was terrible. So you ended up going 4 hours sitting, basically moving inch by inch on a highway that's full, adding 4 hours to my my day just sitting in the vehicle. I was able to drive. A lot of people wonder, well, how'd you get there? I had a van. My mother put money aside through my dad's death, got life insurance, and she used it to buy a van.
Well, that's really nice.
Oh, it's huge.
Because those vans are very expensive.
Yeah, especially, I mean, if I tell you the price now, you say, well, that's cheap. But it was a $15,000 van in 1983 was like
our money was worth a lot more money back then.
Right. So I have known now it's $60,000. So you can tell the difference. But it was a nice van. So I was able to drive, able to commute, but the commute was too long. So I got sick of the drama in the metro housing. It was just too much.
Well, it was just wearing you down, right?
Because
you can't escape that because you're living with it all the time, right?
There's a lot of abuse that goes on with people with disabilities. So
yeah,
I had seen enough. You know, I've seen people use people, manipulate the attendants, manipulating people. I've seen too much, and I was sick of it. While I was working, I had tenants come in and steal my cassette tapes, my music, and I just wanted to move on. So I did. I got a person I knew. She had a apartment that was accessible, and she was she had a spinal cord injury herself, and she had someone living with her. So I thought, I got her apartment. I got a really nice place in Scarborough. But even so, the job was only temporary, so now I was unemployed again, and the drugs were there, even probably easier to get at because it wasn't as poor apartment as I came from, but there are also people who can afford stronger drugs, right? Yeah. So there was always this line you never want to cross, right?
Actually, there was one more thing I wanted to ask you before we go on that far. So your relationship with God after breaking your neck, because you went to Sunday school, but you didn't have a relationship with him. It's just kind of something you did back then. So this whole time, you just never thought of God. You just,
I did think about God. So growing up, we went to a denominational church, and it was all ceremony. I was sprinkle baptized when I was in grade 4, which I don't believe in now. I don't believe that's right. I wasn't an infant because I didn't grow up in a place initially that believed in sprinkle baptism, but we switched over. And when we switched over, I had to be sprinkle baptized to be able to go to do whatever they did. But it was all about going to Sunday school, but never understanding what the Bible said. Hey, Sunday school, we listened to Bill Cosby's version of Noah and the Ark. I mean, it was a record. So it was one of those things where you just go, it's so bad. The teachers were not believers. They didn't have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ at all. So I was getting information.
Social club.
Oh, it was terrible. But so you're young, you do that, and I ended up going to Saturday school to get confirmed, and there was a confirmation. It's kind of like you recite the law or recite 10 commandments and go in front of the church, and somehow that's a graduation to go and listen to the preaching instead, sit with the adults. I don't know. It meant nothing because all you're doing is repeating something that they're told to repeat. It doesn't mean your heart means right. No, but I had a belief in Jesus Christ. I knew he was a person. I believed he was, whether I believed he was God, I didn't know. I just knew he was the one who performed miracles. So I did hear the stories because my mom was a believer, but we didn't really talk about it.
Yeah.
But I was put in a Sunday school where it had the odd teacher that was saved, and one in particular who was pretty good on the Saturday school I went to get confirmed. She did read stories, but there was no personal relationship. So I had an interest in Jesus Christ, an interest in God, but no relationship. Basically a religion that did not know how to personalize it. It wasn't personal at all. It was like Jesus Christ died on the cross. Yes, I believe that. Died for our sins. Well, yeah, I guess.
Whatever that means, right?
Whatever that means, yeah. It wasn't my sin. I guess it's sins of the whole world, so I guess I'm just in the group. So anybody who's good...
No personal relationship, just...
Yeah, well, the thought you get is that when you... They tell you that Jesus Christ died for the world, for these sins. So somehow you get back to believing, which is what they teach, is that so if you're part of that church and you're a good person, then Jesus Christ died for your sins.
Well, there you go. You got to follow the 10 Commandments. Right?
Yeah, try and follow the 10 Commandments. And so it made no sense, and I saw hypocrisy all over because I knew that the people in the church who were with my parents, and they can very well be believers. My parents were believers. At the same time, the compromise that I knew what these people were doing during the week. They were partying, they were drinking, they were carrying on, they were cursing, swearing, and it was no different. And so when it came to an age where you kind of really don't want to go to that church anymore, there's a point where I thought, hey, I memorized the whole ceremony. I don't even need that book that tells you what to do. I have all the Nicene Creed, the Apostles' Creed memorized. I would recite it and I'd be proud of myself.
Yeah.
That didn't mean anything to me, though. It did. I thought I was a better Christian than other people, and boy, Jesus is going to love me now. So if I die, even though as a teenager going to high school, smoking pot at lunchtime and going drinking at lunchtime, I still thought I was a good person. So that's the belief you get with that type of religion. And that's what infant baptism is so wrong.
Yeah, it gives you a false sense of security, really.
I thought I was going to heaven. I thought, well, I got infant baptized, I got confirmed, I went to church, so God will overlook my swearing, my drinking, partying, and never really thought. When I did break my neck, I did think to myself, God must have a purpose. So it wasn't that I didn't believe that God existed. I wasn't taught evolution in my school in those days.
Yeah. So
it was impersonal, though. I didn't apply what he did for me. I didn't apply it personally.
Yeah.
And so that was the big fall. So that's why that false sense of security, thinking that if you do this, this, and this, equals, and be a good person, equals you might be able to get to heaven. Sure, God is checking off the marks. I know everybody else, there are a lot of people worse than me, and that line keeps moving.
Right? Yeah. Yeah, so there you were, going to buy drugs. Why don't we go back there now that I do like the story about drugs. There's nothing about a guy in a wheelchair, man. Oh, give me some hard stuff. Let's go.
So I'm gonna have to lead up to that a bit so I can explain the story as it goes. So after living in Scarborough, my mother had gotten cancer too. 5 years after I broke my neck, and she had gotten cancer and she passed away. And so I got inheritance. I bought a house in Etobicoke in order that the government wouldn't take all my money, because the way the system works, if you're a person with disability, you can't get a check if you have any sort of money over $3,000. Literally, that's what they expect. Well, with inheritance, my mother made sure that I had enough, and she said, make sure you don't give that to the government. Do something. So I had to teach myself what to do in order to put this money in an investment, which I bought a house.
And you can't just buy any house either, because you got to be the special disability house so you can actually use it, right? So.
Well, with that vocational rehab, I was able to modify the house through the government funds because I now qualified because I was going back to school. So instead of going for manufacturing engineering, I went for a rehabilitation worker. So my goal now was to help other people with disabilities. And so I was getting trained to be counseling and helping people, which I really thought was the right direction. But here I had all the pressure of buying a house, and my mortgage equaled my check. Well, so I thought, wait a minute, that didn't work out. But I got a mortgage. at 11%, which today would be crazy. That was low. So I was trying to be able to afford things, and the stress was just killing me. That's why I don't have teeth. Like, they're there, but they're worn down from grinding my teeth. I was worried so much about finances.
Yeah.
So I was, chaos was happening, right? Now I forget what direction we were going. What was the question you asked me again?
The story about some drugs.
The drive-throughs. Okay, so I had to get Borders to offset the costs. Well, my best friend, who I played wheelchair sports with, I said he wanted to move out of that supportive housing that I was in before. So he brought him and an attendant because he couldn't live and do all the things on his own. They came, moved in. I had before that brought in a person that I know who was struggling in the house she was living in, and I brought her in. But the drug scene was worse with them than it was with me. Remember how you always push the line? You don't think you're bad until you finally get worse and worse and worse.
Well, at least if you have someone worse than you living with you, then you always have that line to look that you're really good. You're the good guy.
Justify it, yeah. I still thought, well, I'm a good Christian, right? I'm better than these guys. But I became similar, but I started thinking, well, this is not good. Like, I started wondering about my situation financially. I don't have parents anymore to get any sort of help. I was not financial, but discuss what do I do with my life.
And your sisters, they're out doing their own thing.
They weren't involved in my life at all, especially since one of them became a born again Christian. Yucks! I didn't want anything to do with that, right? So when she became a born again Christian, I wasn't interested either, and so I was on my own. I was basically on my own, trying to figure out everything, and it took a lot of work. I learned to advocate for myself. But here I have these Borders, and they really needed their drugs. They needed it every day, and I wasn't on a daily using. I did it to party, and I did it once in a while. But they had it without it. We ran out, and it was like, we got to go get some. We got to go get some. And there's a thing in Toronto called a drive-through, where you end up going to an apartment building. And that's where the drug dealers are. So there's an area in Jane and Finch in Toronto, and anybody from Toronto knows this area. It was a bad area. It was apartment buildings that were, again, metro housing. And it was some place you never thought you'd ever go, right? That would be way over the line that I drew for myself. And they said, well, I know where to get. They wanted their drugs. I know where to get some. And it's like, I don't want to go there. That area's kind of bad. So they talked me into it. And so I think one of the lowest points was going through that apartment area where a person can have a gun. The guy that was living in our house, he knew martial arts, and he had a temper. And I was like, oh no, what if he gets into a row with one of these dealers? And so he was going to do the negotiating, and I was like, oh, this is... So we did. Went through the drive-thru. I had one headlight that was out so it could be identifiable. And it just seemed to me that day when you're going through Jane and Finch back apartment drive-thru was where I realized I had crossed the line. But there's no going back, right? You did it. Yeah. I never did it again. Mainly because a lot of events happened to change that part of my life. I think it was necessary to see how far I was going. Like, God was showing me, you know what? This is where you are. Is this where you want to be?
Yeah.
And I remember the chaos that happened after that. And the Borders were fighting because... the one had a boyfriend whose brother was a drug dealer, and she started getting suspicious that I was going to get rid of her, which was never the intention. So she was listening to phone calls of my pleading with the government, saying I'm in trouble, help, not because of her, but that's what she took it as.
Well, with drugs, you get some paranoia as well.
Oh, absolutely. Especially with coke. I mean,
is that what you guys were doing, coke?
I wasn't so much, no, but she was. I did it once in a while. And boy, that's a
pretty serious drug.
It is. It's totally. It wasn't crack. I mean, crack wasn't invented yet, or hadn't gotten around to the But boy, there's an admission on camera. But I did. Not a lot. I didn't do that. I only did it like 5 or 6 times.
I wasn't as bad as them.
Yes, here I'm doing it again, eh? But they were hooked. Like it is, and she was getting paranoid, and she had thought I was trying to turn her in, and it was just like a paranoia. And so it ended up that she got her boyfriend riled, who got his brother riled up, and next thing you know, I'm in bed, contemplating life, thinking, "Oh, where am I?" And a big fight breaks out. Police come, arrest the guys at my borders, and it's like, wow, how bad is this? It really spoke to me, and I remember looking out my window that day or the day before, close to that time, and wondering, what's happening, God? I was taught to pray. Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep, etc. by my mother, and I did that every night, whether I was drunk, high, no matter what. But now it was changing, where I pray that usual prayer and add things. Lord, get me out of this. Now I wouldn't use Lord. I'd probably say God, because Lord was not a term I was comfortable with. Yeah. But God, get me out of this mess. I'm a good person, aren't I? I remember staring out the window in my bedroom, looking outside and saying, why is there all these bad things happening to me? I'm a good person. Why? What? How do I evaluate a good person? Was that a good person? Absolutely not. Destroyed.
How much your scale has
oh yeah,
has changed.
And I didn't even see it even then. But I knew one thing, that I started disliking my life. I started disliking drugs and alcohol. I started getting sick of the partying. I just did not like where I was at. And it got worse. So, boy, I had spent a Christmas alone. You know, you just kind of think, well, how bad can this be? Well, you really know, even though I was popular amongst many people and friends, I knew a lot of people when it comes to family. And both my parents gone, not getting invited anywhere. There you are, Christmas alone.
There's nothing more being more alone than being alone on Christmas.
Yeah, yeah. And you kind of think,
like it's like,
yeah, it's so depressing. And it's kind of a season I don't even care for, and I may explain it in another video. But I'm not a big fan of that, because Christmas can bring depression to people. And actually, I could say that was the first time that I actually got depressed. The psychiatrist may have said to me after I broke my neck, he said, how you doing? I said, I'm fine. And he said, well, you won't be. You'll get depressed. And I thought, no, I won't. Like, that's stupid. Well,
it's funny because it's like years later, and it didn't really have anything to do with that.
And I don't think he was.
But
I don't think he had any super wise, intelligent thing to say to me, because I really didn't think he was very helpful.
No.
But when you come to your life and you see how far you've gone down, and you start recognizing where you are before God, that's depressing where you are if you can't get out.
That was kind of your rock bottom moment right there, that Christmas probably, right?
Yeah, that Christmas was, and clearly that incident which happened the May after that Christmas, where all that chaos in my home happened, and we ended up, my friend who was in a wheelchair, the attendant was gone working during the day, so we had to look all of a sudden for protection, because that guy who was in jail, because he got thrown in the slammer for a night, we knew he was coming out, and he probably was coming for revenge, so we decided to grab a newspaper and let's look for a dog for protection. So when the attendant who knew martial arts wasn't there, we could at least protect ourselves. So we're looking at a major paper in Toronto, and a friend says, hey, look at this. There's a totally accessible house in a place called St. Catharines. And my house was not getting finished. The guy who was working on it just quit. It was partially accessible, not fully accessible. It was an old war house in Toronto and Etobicoke. Nice neighborhood, but I wouldn't want to live there, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So when we found that dog, we were looking for a dog. We found this house. The very next day, I looked on the map, and let's go to St. Catharines, and drove and bought this house, put a down payment on the condition I'd sell my own house in Etobicoke. within a month. So there was a lowest point was Christmas, yes, but even lower was that incident. But it was served a purpose, because when we found that new house and I put an offer in, it was my money alone. It wasn't the other guys. That all of a sudden there was hope. But what happened after that, it was even greater hope, which is the most amazing part of the whole story. God had to first show me where I was at, because when I broke my neck, I said, "Oh well," right?
Yeah, you just kind of brushed it off. Right? Your mom took it more serious than you did.
Yeah, and then I was playing wheelchair sports, Murder Ball it was called. It was fantastic. It was fun. I got to travel with Murder Ball all over the place, all over Canada. It was fantastic. It was a sport. I just replaced hockey, right? I was a better Murder Ball player than I was a hockey player. And I was able to excel. And I really enjoyed it. But what God had to do was bring me down to say, hey, you might be enjoying that, but look at what you're doing in life in general. Well, a mess. I was an absolute mess. I mean, basically,
he had to really bring you down to be able for you to even realize it, right?
Stubborn German.
Yeah, you're just too positive of a person.
Positive and not in reality of where I was at.
Yeah.
Spiritually, he had to wake me up. And he did. He did, because it was a point where just after I bought the house, but I hadn't moved in yet, still haven't sold my house, got a real estate agent from my lawyer from a whiplash case that happened, which is another story. And he gave me his secretary, who was going into real estate, and she was selling her first house, and the amount of money that she said we should try for her, because the price of houses were going up, similar to today, that we could ask for this high amount. I thought, that's asking a lot for this house, right? So anyways, I mean, this house was so expensive, I was using an oil furnace. Now, an oil furnace was incredibly expensive and inefficient. There was no insulation in this house. I ran out of money to pay for heating so badly until they'll get those people to move in, my tenants to move in, that they cut off. He couldn't put any more oil in because I couldn't keep up the bill. So I had no heating in the wintertime in Canada.
Oh wow!
It was cold. So I remember sitting around and they moved in. It was cut off, and we sat around the stove, the electric stove, to get warm for a couple of days until that guy said, "Well, I'm paying your bills," and he did that. And I was able to put oil in. I repaid the guy later on. So having said that, I was in this house still, but it was Easter, in between the time I bought the house and the time I moved in St. Catharines.
Yeah.
And that Easter, my sister, as I mentioned earlier, was a born-again Christian. I always thought she was fanatical. A year before, she came to tell me when I was living, it was about a year before, in Scarborough, because I didn't live in Etobicoke very long. She came to tell me about Jesus Christ. I thought, oh, brother, that's really what I want to hear. I thought you're going to visit me for the first time. And she went to tell me, and she's talking to me about Jesus Christ. And she said, I am a Christian, right? Because I grew up, and you grew up. You're sprinkle baptized, you're confirmed. And I said, I am a Christian. She goes, but if you're a Christian, would you be living like this? And she's pointing in my apartment, right? There's the stuff that's hanging around that doesn't look like a Christian home. And she said, if you really believe in Christian, wouldn't you be excited to tell people about Christ? But she was doing it really clumsily and thinking, and she left, and we both felt like, ugh, what a terrible visit. She told me later that she went home thinking she really blew it. But when I was playing wheelchair sports one day, it was a big major tournament, and we played hard, and then you partied hard after the tournament was done.
Yeah.
And you had a banquet. And I remember being so drunk that night in a hotel, and it's 3 o'clock in the morning, because I looked at the clock, and I don't remember the entire night except this. looking at the clock and seeing my friends and saying, in a drunken, crazy way, you know I'm a Christian. And I don't know what the reaction was.
They probably laughed at you.
Oh, they didn't. I think they ignored it and think, well, he's just drunk, so who cares? I don't even think they remembered the night.
You're probably so drunk you're stupid at that point, right?
Oh, we all were. I mean, we're always stupid. So I woke up in the morning in the hotel room, and my room was trashed. I don't know what happened. It was just toilet paper thrown around, stuff like that. Stupid stuff. It probably was them. And, but anyways, I was good friends with a lot of the guys I played with. I mean, I was one of the party leaders, right?
Yeah.
And, but then I woke up and thought, I am not a Christian. I remembered that. It was put in my head, I'm not a Christian. So all these things happened for a reason. That after that is when God started working on my heart and showed me how much I was not a Christian. Because my lifestyle didn't meet up with what a Christian would think about or behave. So it was that born-again Christian, my sister, and I invited myself on Easter to visit because I loved my little nieces, right?
Yeah.
We went to visit and stayed at her house and went to this little Bible chapel in Stratford area, just outside Stratford, Tavistock, where she attended. And I wasn't going there for that. I was going there to visit. But as soon as I went in the building, I knew this was something different. Something that was not like the denomination church I went to. There was a godliness about it that I couldn't even explain. That I really believe God was revealing that to me.
Yeah. Well, he had to get you into that point where you'd be able to see it, right?
Right.
After all of this, and it's like here it is, here it's revealed. Now you make a choice, right? Like,
and I had been there before, but it's never struck me like this because I wasn't ready. Right.
Yeah, you had to be in the right frame of mind. You had to be in the
So I remember there, and then I heard the preacher, and the preacher wasn't super polished. There was no robes, no ceremony. It was very simple teaching from the Bible. That's all it was. And I'm listening to what he's saying, and I'm thinking, oh, my sister must have talked to this guy, because what he's saying is stuff she would know.
Talking right to your soul, right?
Yeah. But then he started saying things that my sister didn't know. He was saying stuff that I was thinking. He's saying stuff that I had remembered in the middle of the night, 3 o'clock in the morning. If you really believe you're a Christian, why aren't you speaking of Christ? And if you really believed he was coming back, wouldn't you be knocking on the doors telling people about Christ? Oh man, I was saying, that's exactly what 3 o'clock in the morning on a drunken. I remembered that, and that's exactly what my sister had told me. And all of a sudden I'm realizing the things he's saying, my sister didn't know. She couldn't have possibly told him these things because he's also telling things of my heart. And I knew that was God. I knew immediately, I better take this message serious. And then he told how I can be saved, how I can be forgiven, and what it means, what Jesus Christ did on the cross, to personalize it. And he said, if you truly believe it, just ask Christ into your heart. Ask him. I don't know if he said that. That's not the way I normally term it. He would say, believe in Christ and receive Christ as your personal Savior. That's the what he did, not the other heart thing. Believe in him and trust that he died and rose again for you. You shall be saved, and that's a promise of God that would be true. And so I did. I prayed right there without telling anybody. I did it silently after he was finished preaching. I said, Christ, I really believe, Lord Jesus, I believe that you died for me. I believe I am a terrible sinner. I know that. I mean, there was no question about that. And I said, I want to receive you as my personal Savior. I believe you rose and died again. You rose again from the dead. Sorry. Getting a little excited about it.
Getting a little excited.
Because it's such an emotional time. It's such a pinnacle in my life, right? Yeah. That moment.
Well, and it was all personal, and it was for you.
Very personal.
Right? So, it's none of this abstract, Jesus died for the sins of the world. Right. But this was for you personally.
I knew he had died before.
Yeah.
But
so what? But now you knew it personally.
Right. And instantly a difference came over me. Instantly. It was simultaneous. When I finished the prayer, I was changed. And I was the dread of all that's happened over the last little while was gone. The joy, I was joyful. I couldn't believe the change. And it's kind of one of those things, those moments where you wish you could take your heart out and give it to someone so they can know what it's like to feel joy for the first time. Because although I like to have fun, I like to party, I like to do things, and didn't grow up on a hardship other than when I broke my neck, the joy that I had then and I still have, is everlasting.
Well, it's also a great amount of freedom. You get freed from the bondage of sin.
Oh, it's incredible.
It's a very terrible thing to have control over.
Yeah. There's that book, Pilgrim's Progress, and I read it afterwards, and it talks about where Christian, who's the believer, takes off that load on his knapsack. I don't know if you read the book, but it's really good. He takes off this, it's like a load of rocks he's carrying around. And when he received Christ in the book, he took off that, and suddenly all that burden was lifted. And that's exactly how I felt. I felt like I felt weightless. Like it was just, it's not crazy, weird, what people do now. It's really in the heart. It's in the soul. It's deep that burden of sin was lifted off of me. And there's a wonderful song, Burdens Are Lifted at Calvary. And it was so true for me. I didn't know that song at the time, but I learned it later. And it's a perfect description of what happened at that moment. And we left there, and Stratford's a beautiful city, especially in the springtime. And I think it was the most gorgeous day I've ever seen. The colors are brighter and just delightful, right? And then there was an evening meeting. It was Easter, right? And had a meal at my other sister's place. And anybody going tonight? And I went, oh, no, we're not going tonight. I said, well, I'm going. I went to the evening meeting. And I didn't tell anybody what I'd done. I didn't tell anybody that I had received Christ. I didn't really know what I had done. But I just knew it was the greatest feeling, the greatest thing. The burden was lifted, and so I went to the meeting, and I drove all the way back to Toronto thinking, wow, I keep thinking about God. I didn't understand why. And here I was all the way back to Toronto thinking, I remember saying, I'm thinking about God, but I don't know why, but I'm loving it. And then I started getting closer to Toronto. I started going, oh no.
It's like you're going back into the old ways, right?
Right. How am I going to not do drugs with these guys that I live with? How am I... but the Lord gave me strength to do, and to be honest with them once, and to say, I'm going back to St. Catharines. Now, interesting story after that is that...
Well, actually, on your St. Catharines, you really didn't finish that, because you sold your house or whatever, your old one. It sold on the last day, right?
I was just going to say that. You beat me to the punch. I was going right that direction.
I didn't want you to forget it. So
I wasn't.
Why don't we reiterate that?
So, when I went back to Toronto, I had like 2 weeks to sell the house. We had open houses and no buyers, because I think at that time we thought, well, the price is pretty high. I was a little concerned, and we talked to my real estate agent, and she was getting a little concerned too, and maybe we did bring it a little too high. And the last weekend before, I prayed because I'm now a believer, right? I prayed, God, if you want me to move to St. Catharines, sell my house. It's that simple. Like, I need a buyer. And I couldn't really compromise on the price either, because now I already had a commitment to the price in St. Catharines, which wasn't. It was actually less, of course, but it was a better house. And after I prayed that, on that weekend before I had the last opportunity, we had an open house. One buyer came in, another buyer came in, a third buyer came in, all at the same time. And they all saw each other there, and they all wanted his house. And one particular guy, it was a Polish community, and he wanted to be in a Polish community because he was Polish. And he put in exactly what we asked for. and sold the house just in time. I didn't have any bites on it before that. There was like people fishing, but not really committed. Sold the house. Low ballers. Yeah, and it was amazing. Got exactly what I was asking for. Next thing you know, I didn't want that one moving in with us because his temper was very bad. My buddy, who's in a wheelchair, I wanted him to come, and he was coming, and we had to tell this other guy with a temper not to come. So again, I prayed. I said, because we discussed how are we going to tell this guy not to come because he blew his top and we couldn't handle it. Yeah. And I just prayed, give me the words to say, and it just came out. And he said, okay. And the other guy came over and said, how'd you do that? Like I said, I just prayed. And I was stunned as he was. We both looked at each other. The other guy was not a believer by any means, and never, as far as I know, ever became a believer. But it worked, and now we're in this new place and a new start. And
you're out of that toxic environment.
Oh, yeah. It was so much better. And now with a new start, I had drank some beers, but I was no longer interested in the lifestyle. And my friend was a little disappointed because he was in that lifestyle. He was
your drinking buddy.
Yeah, he was my drinking buddy. We had made all these plans how we were going to party, and I was going to go to Niagara College, and I was going to do this, and we're going to get all the girls to come over, and we're going to be so popular and all this stuff. And all of a sudden now I'm like, you want to go to church this Sunday?
Oh, man.
I had gone to that men's conference in Guelph, and I was invited by the people that Tavistock.
Oh, okay.
And they invited me to go to the men's conference. And I saw godly men, and there was a couple of hundred there.
Probably some of the first you've ever really met too.
Was
right?
The first, yes, absolutely.
Wow.
And I seen Christianity being lived out by these men, and their love for Christ, they're singing for Christ, they're bellowing out, "It is well with my soul," which is a wonderful hymn that is still today my favorite.
Yeah. A very big change than the old church, like in your Sunday school, where it's like you drink during the week and then you put your nice clothes on for Sunday, right? Like these were people actually living it.
Right, they're living it. Hey, and dealing with the struggles that they have, but they knew what was wrong, and there was grace involved. There's care and a love that I've never seen in people before. And so it was wonderful. But again, I was scared of coming back into a time where I wasn't so sure if I was going to be able to live it.
Yeah, it's one of those things because you don't know if you have the strength to do that, or even the goodness of other people. It's like, well, how do you put yourself on that level? It's because you almost got to make yourself vulnerable.
Yeah.
To be exposed to love like that. Because the other thing is too, it's like, when you're growing up, it's like you got your parents, they love you, but to meet other people and have them love you, it's kind of weird because it's kind of, what did you do to deserve it? And it's, that's the thing with love. It's not about deserving it, right? It's something that is given.
And everybody had something, right? So it's like, don't you realize what I was, what I did? But, they all had their stories. But they all have their stories of how Christ brought them out of that life through the Spirit that He gives you. When I made that prayer, I knew I received the Holy Spirit because of that change in my heart.
When you get that new heart.
Oh, the joy.
A new heart, new beginning. It's like you're a different person.
Right. Jesus Christ said, I came to give you joy. And when you're in turmoil, there's still that joy. Your circumstances do not make you any different. He's there. Yeah. So the difference between happiness, whereas dependent on your circumstances, the joy that gives you from Jesus Christ is in the heart that can't change. It just is always there. So now I'm living in this house and went to this conference, and I met a guy at the conference, and he said, so where do you live? Casually. I mean, I didn't talk to anybody like this really until this guy came in. I said, St. Catharines. So he said, I live in St. Catharines. I go, really? He said, so do you go to church there or anything? Oh, I don't go anywhere. He said, well, why don't you come to our church? And I was like, okay. It ended up being a block away from me. Now, I had prayed, Lord, I don't want to be in a place that I was before. I want to be a place that you want me to be, that teaches your word properly. Because I had realized if I broke my neck at 21 and died that day, I would have been in hell. And this is 7 years later. So I would have been in hell 7 years with eternity of hell to look forward to. And so I didn't want to be fooled again. I just wanted to change. I wanted to follow, because the Spirit was convicting me too, right? The Spirit gives the ability to show you what you were like and that you don't have to be that anymore. It's that freedom from the bondage of sin. And I was free. So even though I got drunk, I remember getting drunk with my buddy there and thinking, this really stinks. This is something I don't want to do anymore. And he started thinking, well, why is he stopping partying? He's no fun. Why did he come here? Matter of fact, he gets so upset. There's one time he did come. I was getting ready Sunday morning after I talked to this guy. And I went to that church that was recommended down the street. And it was in wheeling distance, so I could just wheel there. So we both went. He said to me, where are you going? I said, I'm going to church. I was kind of embarrassed at first, right? And he said, oh, can I come? We can meet some girls there. That's all he cared about. At the time, I was like that too, right? But now I was interested in meeting Christ there. Like, even though, to me, being with Christians was important. And learning the Word of God. So I was going for one reason. He was going for another reason. And we went there and heard a message from a gospel preacher. Now, this man just passed away this past weekend at 97 years old, and he's always preached the gospel. One of the best gospel preachers I ever heard. Gospel means how to get saved. Like, he told what Christ did, how to personalize it, how sin will just keep dragging it down. This guy smoked cigarettes like I used to, but when I got saved, I never smoked another cigarette. This guy is smoking it.
It's just the guy you needed to see, right?
Exactly. And as he's preaching, he's giving the analogy of, people who smoke will have a cigarette and then they'll always need more to satisfy. You can never do without. You have to keep getting more and more, but that's not the way Christ is. He gives you joy once and you have it forever. You don't need to keep going back. And that was a perfect message. So after we left the building, he lit up a cigarette, my friend did, and he said, I guess that guy doesn't like smoking. He didn't get the full message of it, but unfortunately. And he just, it got to the point where he didn't talk to me anymore. He stayed in his room simply because I wouldn't party anymore. He slept all day and drove back to Toronto with his buddies in Toronto to party there every day. I never even saw him anymore. He just saw the van, heard the van, and basically he'd stayed in his room. And
he couldn't deal with it, right? He can't deal with your new being.
Yeah, and I totally, the Lord separated me from the friends in Toronto that were dragging me down. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of funny because the verse that we were going on through the Bible, the how can two walk together if they don't get along? And this is like the definition of that. You guys were getting along great. The second one of you changes, it's done. It's like, it's not like something that you didn't want to see him anymore. It's just that, as a different person, it's like you guys weren't in the same boat anymore.
Right. I tried to still be friends. Because
you wanted to still be friends, but he couldn't handle it.
Right. And I remember the last, I was listening to a radio program on a preacher, and by accident, I had this old stereo that was given, I bought when we moved into the house that was part of the deal. And I turned the dial and I found there's a Christian radio station, which I've never heard of before, and there's a preacher going, and he's preaching on party lifestyle. And that's not right.
How convenient.
And how drinking is wrong, he just said. And I was thinking, oh, he's so right. And so I went to one more banquet, and I had a beer there, and It got so warm. My friends didn't sit with me. I just sat with another guy who didn't drink much. So I ordered a beer, and I didn't get to the whole banquet, the whole night. It was just a half a beer drank, and it never finished her. And that was the last time I had a beer. And it isn't that, this is a rule that you can't have beer. I mean, the fact is, it's a weakness of mine, and I just didn't want it anymore. I had realized that I have something much better than that.
See, something that's interesting is that a lot of people think, oh, well, I'll become a Christian, and then all the things I like, I can't do them anymore. And that's not really how it works.
No.
More the way it works is that, some of the things that you like to do, you just don't like doing them anymore. Exactly. It's not that you can't do them anymore. It's that you don't have the desire to do them anymore, which is completely different. It's like you got other things to do. You got better things to do. It's like you don't need to be consumed with drink or whatever other vice you kind of have, right? Like it's crazy. It's something you don't experience unless you get saved. That how your priorities in life change, or how like what you value changes.
Exactly. It's exactly the way I would put it. It's not that I can't do things. It's I can do whatever I want, really. I don't want to do anything I want. I already messed up my life. The Lord showed me if I did my way what it would be like. Right?
Yeah.
It was a disaster. So I don't want to do those things. And I want to be living a life that represents Jesus Christ. I didn't have any desire to drink. It wasn't that it went through half of that beer because, well, it's not right. No, it's because, it tasted terrible now. It just wasn't me anymore. I'm a new
The reason why a lot of people drink is they drink to fill their spirit. Right. And what happens when you get born again is your spirit is full. So then, it really doesn't do anything for you.
Yeah.
It's just, you just don't care. You just don't have no interest in it.
Yeah.
It doesn't get you to the same place you were before because you're in a better place than you could get before with it.
Right. And often I think, well, I didn't get depressed, but I sure partied a lot, so maybe I didn't have time to get depressed. Maybe I was too busy. Maybe I was using the alcohol and drugs to avoid being depressed. I don't know. No. I don't want to superanalyze it, but I know one thing: I didn't want it anymore. I didn't need it anymore, and I wanted to serve Christ. And I wanted not to be fooled again, and that's the thing. So
as a new person.
Yeah, new creation in Christ. That's the greatest thing. Yeah, so the Bible says that we are no longer sons of disobedience, right? Sons of disobedience means people who are not following God. We don't want to be that way. We want to be followers of Christ and living a life, and it's a joyful way to live. It's not a burden at all. It's the most thrilling way to live, and I try to convey that to people and hope that they understand that.
They think it's bondage when it's freedom, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, what bondage is a sin, right? That's the biggest bondage. And that's what I was in. So I know. I've experienced it, and I know the freedom and the joy, the freedom from that bondage. Take a cigarette. I tried quitting for months before I was saved, and I couldn't. And so if it's something I enjoy, well, yeah, but the thing is, it's bad for your health. I don't want it. But I couldn't stop. That bondage to that cigarette was strong, even though I wasn't a heavy smoker. I couldn't stop. When I got saved, never had another cigarette. Yeah, it's quite a change.
Yeah, that's for sure. So you went to that St. Catherine's Church there you're probably a regular then, right? And
oh yeah.
Where did things go from there?
Well, ended up I thought I'd never have a family, and I did meet my wife there at a church picnic. This is the Hollywood script, right?
That
things don't always turn out perfect, but we were married for a number of years, and I was very active in the church. I did a lot of help used to have a meeting at the retirement home. We did some preaching and met, hopefully some people that received Christ at that retirement home when they heard the message. That was
better late than never.
Yeah. Well, that's where I learned to preach. That was really terrible. But I learned to preach there, and I studied the Bible. See, the thing was, I went to a seminar that said how important it is to read the Word of God. learn it. So, and that was within the first year of being saved. I got a job very quickly. That's how I met my wife. We were both looking for jobs. We just became good friends. And then it turned into a relationship. Next thing you know, we're engaged. But at the same time, I needed a job. And the Lord provided a job exactly what I was going through for school the second time as rehabilitation worker in a place called the Independent Living Centers, which help people with disabilities get what they need in their families and support. That's exactly what I was going to school for.
Was that all in St. Catharines, or did you have a big commute? Yeah.
Yeah, that was, well, it was in Welland. Actually, the original, we did move to St. Catharines, so I would commute from St. Catharines to Welland. And I was able to listen to Christian radio station on the way to preparing and driving there. So it was great. I mean, so things were going good, but I was warned when I went into speak to the church elders for the very first time when I wanted to join. One man said, "Well, you know, Peter," after telling how much joy I had and how thrilled I was to be a believer, he said, "Well, you know, Peter, it's not always easy being a Christian." I said, "Oh, what are you thinking? Like, do you know what I lived before?" So there are things in life, and he was so true, that bumps down the road, but how we handle them. So when I first went to work, I expected all my friends, everybody, to be excited for me, but they weren't. And I put Christmas card, a little tract that gives the gospel message of how you receive Christ as your Savior, into all the people at work. And the Christmas card, well, I got blasted out of the water by my boss. She just was furious. And that was, oh man, I'm not good at evangelism, so I'll just teach the Bible, so I'll study it and read it. And I got up at 5 o'clock in the morning. Now, I was wrong. I was right in what I did in giving the tracts out in the Christmas card. I still do that today. At the same time, my confidence wasn't there. And I also needed to defend the Bible. One time at work, I was there in lunchtime, and I was eating lunch in the room, and then I got surrounded by the co-workers, and there was only like 5 working there, including me. But my boss wasn't too happy with Christians because they used the Bible in the wrong way. And so they started asking me about things about the Bible. Now, I'm a new Christian. I don't know very much at all. So as they're questioning me on these things, I was coming up with the answers. I'm like, wow, where's that coming from? I didn't know those answers. So I'm answering all these questions, and I knew they were right because it made sense. And I came home and told my wife, this is after we're married, and I said, I'm not gonna believe this. I was like questioned about the Bible and all these things, and I got the answers. Like, the Lord gave me the answers. I know it wasn't me because I didn't know those answers. And if I would go back and look at the Bible, they were right, so the Lord will help you through those things. And it was kind of exciting to be able to find out that you can witness to people, can tell people about Christ. And maybe not everybody's going to like it. And that's where that elder was right. Yeah, there's a road where people are going to be angry at sharing Christ and angry at this video maybe.
Yeah.
But it's personal, it's real, and it happened, and the change of life is evidence.
That and the hard times really help build character.
It does.
And when you get stumbled in one thing, you study, and then you don't stumble in it again. And that's really, how you grow.
Yeah.
You don't usually grow by success. You usually grow from failure. And
yeah, very much so.
Being a Christian doesn't mean you don't have hard times, you don't have failure. It's just that you have someone to turn to when you are having a hard time.
Right. And he comforts at the time where you're not alone. You're never alone. He's always there. No. And I in the 30 years I've been a believer, there have been bumpy roads. But I always know I can turn to him. And it doesn't bring me away from him. It draws me closer to the Word of God, which comforts me through the Spirit, by the Word, and it tells me why these things happen. Not specifically, like, it tells me that, you will need this because you will grow this way. And it's just it's just so wonderful to have the Word of God and knowing that it's real. It's a living Word. It's applicable to daily life. That's why this it's so important for people to read the Bible and have someone help them understand. I had very godly men who through St. Catherine's and Tavistock over the years that have drawn me to the Word of God and lived a godly life to show evidence that it's real. And it's wonderful.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we've been talking for an hour and a half now, so I think this should be long enough for anyone who wants to sit through this. But
yeah,
if you haven't come to accept Christ yet, I mean, today's a perfect day to do it. And you don't know what's going to happen the next. You don't want to break your neck or die from something. So
I think too. Just want to say one more thing. It's not religion you're looking for. This is not religion. It's a personal relationship. And maybe people can't understand what that means. You do religion and you do ceremony and you repeat things and you just go through the motions of doing everything on a regular basis. Everybody's religious in some way. You can be religious at something totally secular. But what we have as believers, we have a relationship. Like He is near. He speaks to the heart in a voice through His Word. It's not an audible voice, but it's a silent speaking to the heart that you know that the Word of God is real and that He never leaves you, even in the darkest times. So don't confuse it with religion. If you need to know how to come to Christ, John 3, read John 3, find out through the scriptures of what it means to be. If you look at the law and you see yourself failing, not meeting God's standards, of course, none of us do. The important thing is that all have sinned and fall short of glory of God. I am not better than other people, obviously, by my testimony. I wouldn't share this part of my life if it wasn't so important. I mean, here I am, an open book to you for a reason, that Christ is wonderful, and you don't have to live in a religious life because religion doesn't save. You need that relationship.
Sounds like your cat's making noise.
He is. He's come. My cat is Darcy. He's at the door. He can't. His head is a little bit in the picture, so we can't cut him out. But he will be my co-host on those videos.
Sounds good. All right. Well, take care.
All right. You too. Thanks.